Hello world! If you've ever wondered how it'd be like to go to Japan, immerse yourself, and learn Japanese, then this video is for you. This video is going to be a chat with my friend Jess, who's both self-studied and attended a Japanese language school for a year. I'll just simply let her talk for most of the video, but before I get into that, I wanted to tell you about one thing: the Japanese writing system. To put it incorrectly, it's a set of 3 alphabets. To put it correctly, it's a single set of logographic kanji. So these are icons that represent ideas, and another 2 sets of kana, are syllabaries, and this is hiragana and katakana. These are syllabic in that they represent sounds. Now, by the time a student graduates from high school, they will have to know 2,000 kanji, so no small task. On the other hand, when a student is first entering grade 1, they'll probably know both hiragana and katakana, and each one contains a set of 46 characters. So most learners will have a big task ahead of them to learn all the kanji. Now, the exception will be Chinese and Taiwanese students who will already know what the kanji represents, the kind of overall idea, because kanji is derived from the Chinese writing system. They won't necessarily know how to pronounce it, but they kind of know like what this symbol means, what this symbol means, what that symbol means. Anyways, now let's get on with the interview.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and I came to Japan just to experience the expat life, really. Just wanted to live in another country. So my husband and I decided to move here together, and we thought Japan would be a pretty interesting place to experience living abroad because the culture and language is so different. And because of that, of course, we have to spend some time learning the language, so that's why I decided to study Japanese at a Japanese language school. Yeah, I did a lot of research when I was looking at a Japanese language school. There's obviously a lot of options out there, and it took me around a year actually to decide on a Japanese language school and go through all of the application process and all of that. In the end, the school that I chose because there were students from all around the world. I had heard that there are some schools that really focus on particular cultural groups, which, there's nothing wrong with that at all, but I wanted to be in an environment where people from all around the world were catered for in the education system, so that's why I decided to go with the school that I did. Yeah, they came from a wide range of different backgrounds at the school I ended up going to. Actually, surprisingly, a lot of them were from Sweden, which I wasn't quite expecting. But yeah, there were quite a lot of Scandinavian students. As an Australian, I was kind of a minority, but there were students from countries all around Asia. There were people from America, from Canada, England. Yeah, it was a really diverse group of people. So we went to basically like a night school to learn some of the basics of Japanese. So there we learned hiragana, katakana, a few basic kanji, and basically a few survival sentences to get by when we first moved here. So I had that a little bit under my belt, but as most of us are aware, when we move here, that's quickly not enough. So basically once we moved here and had been here for a while, we needed to pick up some more Japanese. I didn't actually study anything formally in Japan before I started studying at the Japanese language school that I went to. So I spent several years in Japan just kind of picking up stuff from my surroundings and trying to do a little bit of self-study. But it didn't really... I wasn't able to achieve the level that I was looking for. I was having a lot of difficulty trying to learn a language that was so different from my own by myself, and so I was kind of seeking out some structure in the way that I was studying. So apart from that first experience in Australia of doing a little bit of Japanese, and also I did do a few kind of community classes and things like that in Japan, but I hadn't actually studied at a Japanese language school before, and I was kind of looking for something with a little bit more structure. So after having been in Japan for a few years and kind of being frustrated with myself and not being able to achieve the level that I wanted, then I decided to go to Japanese language school. So when I first started at Japanese language school, obviously it was like a big change for me from the previous studies that I'd done. I had classes every day, Monday to Friday. It was a full-time course, and every day I had 4 classes of 50 minutes each. And of course, along with that comes a lot of homework and assessments and things like that. I'm not in Japan as a student, I'm working full-time here. So I basically started working full-time and studying on a full-time basis. So that was quite tough for me personally. I know that's not the same journey for everybody, because a lot of my classmates were here as a student. They've come specifically to Japan to study Japanese at a Japanese language school. One lesson would be, say, kanji, and then we'd have 3 lessons of, say, grammar, or it really depended on the day. Some days we'd focus on a particular skill, so we'd do like 1 hour kanji, and then we'd move on to listening and reading, or we'd have to write an essay and then give a speech on it, something like that. So there was something new every day, although I would say most days we had kanji, and most days we did some kind of grammar element. There was a lot of homework also that we had to do every day, and there was also a lot of tests as well. They said at our school that to keep up with the course, you needed to do at least 2 hours of homework a day. For me, I found it was actually more. If it was during the testing period, you know, I was studying something between like maybe probably 5 and 6 hours a day. I think at the very beginning of the course, I felt like I progressed more. Maybe that's because I started off with like less and then everything was new that I was learning. And you know, it's still fresh and you're still like super motivated at that point, right? But then as we moved like further into the course, into the more advanced levels, it was really, it was much more focused on testing. So it was basically whether or not you could pass the JLPT test, the Japanese language proficiency test. And so basically our classes became very focused on passing that and less focused on, you know, everyday communication and perhaps language that might be more beneficial for us. I feel like the JLPT isn't really a good indication of your Japanese level at all. I know some people who have passed high levels of the JLPT but really struggle in daily communication. It really just is focused on very specific and sometimes obscure grammar points or things like that. I guess the problem is for students, if you are actually wanting to live and work in Japan, if you want to work for a Japanese company, they do tend to want to know what JLPT level you have passed. So for some of my classmates, like passing the JLPT level 2, N2, was really important to them to be able to continue living in Japan and perhaps getting a job at a Japanese company. But from a practical standpoint, I don't really feel like passing the JLPT really says anything about your Japanese language ability. So for me personally, it was a little bit frustrating. I know that you are going to a school and, you know, this is probably one of the areas they want you to study, and they want you to be able to pass these tests. But I felt like most of us felt also that we really wanted to be able to communicate in daily life in Japan, and that was something that was quite lacking from the style of the lessons that we were doing. I did take the JLPT N3 in December last year, just to kind of see where my level was at, and to experience what the test is like, because a lot of people ask, what is the JLPT like? And since I'd been studying Japanese, I thought, why not, I'll give it a go without really much preparation, just to see what is my genuine level. And I was able to pass the N3, and that was after 1 year at a Japanese language school full-time.
Oh, that's cool. Congrats.
Thank you.
Nice.
I'm not sure it means anything. As I said, at our school we had people from all around the world, so I was able to kind of observe the different language and cultural and ethnic groups within the class, and I guess we all had different reactions to the learning style. I guess if you're used to more of, for want of a better word, the Western style of education, where it's more two-way communication, where you're expected to ask a lot of questions and maybe you do a lot of speaking and interaction in the class and things like that. It's a bit more of a lecture style, where you're expected to take notes and memorize and that kind of thing. So there were some people in my class, like for example, there was a guy from Taiwan who felt that was quite a usual style for him, whereas, for example, some of the Swedish students in the class were used to a completely different classroom environment, and they found the lack of speaking a little bit frustrating. So I guess it really depends on where you're from, like how you're going to react to this kind of style. Depending on where you're from, obviously you are going to have different difficulties with Japanese, I think. For example, some of the Chinese students in my class, they found kanji relatively easy because they use it in their own native language. But that said, because Japanese and Chinese kanji characters are not always exactly the same, and pronunciation can differ as well, and so while it was easy for them to elicit meaning from a sentence, they also sometimes had difficulty remembering the differences between how they'd write that kanji character in their own language as opposed to in Japanese, and so sometimes that could confuse them a little bit more, although they were much better at reading, I think, because they were able to quickly grab meaning and be able to answer reading comprehension questions without too much trouble. When it comes to pronunciation, I would say maybe some of the Spanish students had difficulty with pronunciation, particularly sounds like kind of Y and J sounds. They had a little bit of difficulty with some of the pronunciation that we did. I guess for me and for people who come from a country where you don't use kanji, we use a romanized alphabet. The kanji was the most difficult because there are so many that you have to remember, not only how to say words, but how to read, how to write, and all the different strokes and the stroke order. I would say for most of the students, the kanji was the most difficult. I'd say overall, speaking was the most difficult, at least for me, because that's something that you really need to practice a lot to be able to speak fluently. So although I may have been able to memorize some grammar and some vocabulary, if it didn't quite come out when I needed it to, then yeah, that was a difficulty for me. We generally did very little speaking practice in class. I mean, we did sometimes, and it depended on the level that we were at. There were some classes in which we did very short practice speaking with our classmates. So we'd have a scenario or something where we'd have to do some kind of role play or just questions and answers. But this was contained usually to a very small amount of the class. I would say maybe we might speak for 15 minutes of the 4 hours that we were there. Yeah, I can completely relate to that. As someone who's kind of, I guess, going back to school in a way, I was one of the oldest students in the class. There were a couple of other students at the school who were kind of coming back after having worked for like, a decade or something, and then decided they wanted to live in Japan and were coming back. But I think I was the only one who was there, like at least in my class and all the students that I interacted with, who was actually working at the same time. So I really valued my time a lot because I was taking a huge chunk out of any free time that I had. And I guess being a little bit older and having a different perspective, and the fact that I was paying for all of this education myself, made me feel a little bit frustrated when students were like kind of acting immaturely, or the teachers were treating us a little bit like children, or it was like a very controlled, somewhat high schoolish environment. And I guess to a certain degree, like looking at some of the behavior that did happen, it was a little bit necessary. But for me, just personally, who wanted to be kind of an independent learner and, like wanted to be trusted and that kind of thing, it was a little bit, it was strange. It was like going back to high school.
Interesting. I didn't know you had that experience. Okay.
Yeah.
That's funny.
When I actually quit Japanese language school, I had finished 5 of the 8 levels at the school that I was at. Basically, I decided to leave doing this full-time study because I felt like I wasn't really getting as much out of it as I could be, in terms of, like, for example, the amount of investment that you're putting into the school. It's, one aspect is, of course, the money. It's very expensive to go to a full-time Japanese language school. Just to give people an idea about how much it costs, like you'd be looking at least around, like, say you're looking at around $2,000 a term. And, second of all was my time and whether I felt like I was getting value out of what I was doing. And I felt like in the later terms that I wasn't quite getting the value out of that. And perhaps there was a different way for me to be able to study Japanese more effectively, and that wouldn't cost as much either. So now that I've left Japanese language school, I'm obviously having to find other ways to study. Some of the things I've been doing have just been even to kind of go back and revise some of the stuff that I was looking at, because we did move through content really, really quickly. And it's not like none of it was valuable. Of course, there's value in a lot of the things that we were doing, but it was just a lot of memorization without actually really practically understanding it or knowing how to use it. So I have been going back through like some of those materials, and then basically I've been using YouTube a lot to look up various videos. There are so many videos online that, explain grammar points in simple ways and give more examples. That I felt that kind of aspect was really lacking in the course. Like, we just basically learned the grammar rule and then moved on, and then we're expected to remember it in a test. So basically I've been trying to actually really understand those grammar points and really utilizing especially YouTube to look at a lot of different videos on there. I've also tried to start like replacing times when I might just be listening to music at home or like on the train with just listening to something in Japanese. So it could be anything. I might just like listen to Japanese news, or just any kind of like podcast, anything that I can find online that seems interesting, and just keep my ear kind of open to Japanese. Of course, living in Japan, I do hear Japanese every day, but my interactions with people might be somewhat limited, like on a daily basis. So on a regular day where I might just, visit the supermarket or go to a restaurant or something like that, I'm having the same types of interactions again and again. And so while I feel confident to order, that doesn't really help me kind of expand my Japanese level. So to hear Japanese that might be used like in different contexts or talking about a wide range of different issues really helps. So I've just been listening to like Japanese news and things like that as well. So to be completely honest, it is much more difficult to keep up with the study schedule now that I don't have the structure of a Japanese language school. I mean, one of the benefits of going to a school is the fact that you have set classes every day, you have a set time, and you're paying for it, so you go, you know. So if you just tell yourself, I'm going to do this much a day, you can very easily just you say, okay, today I'm not going to do it, or, I'll do some more tomorrow. And, I have been guilty of that, especially because, I was like doing so many things every day before. I had a really tight schedule when I was at the school. So it was kind of like, wow, I have a little freedom now. I don't have to do it every day. So honestly, like I haven't been studying every day. But when I do study, though, I'm able to focus on the things that I feel matter most to me, which I feel is a little bit more beneficial than studying grammar points for the sake of them. So I'm able to like really focus on the things that I feel I'm struggling with. I usually identify those with my communications in everyday life. So if there was a situation where I just couldn't say what I wanted to say, okay, I should try to learn how to actually say that. So, and I find that those are the things that stick with me more, because I know that I will actually use it again in the future. If it's come up already in my everyday life, it's likely it's going to come up again. So I try to focus on those things, which has been, I guess, I feel it's been a bit more fruitful for me. Another thing that I'm looking into is getting a Japanese tutor. So, the Japanese language school was expensive. So I thought that instead of paying for that, I can reinvest like that money, or use that money instead for, say, a private lesson like a couple of times a week, and still be far ahead monetarily when it comes to my Japanese learning. So I am also looking into getting like a private Japanese teacher, which I think also might address some of the issues that you have with self-study, right? Where you don't have someone like watching over you or expecting you to do something. But if you have a set lesson time and your teacher gives you some kind of homework or task to do throughout the week, then I'm going to do it. So I'm thinking maybe that kind of semi-structure is what I'm going to do going forward. Don't expect that Japanese language school is going to instantly just teach you Japanese. You're not going to just be fluent in Japanese. Even if you stay in Japan and study for a couple of years, you complete a course from the start to the end, you're not going to be fluent in Japanese without putting in a lot of extra effort. You're going to have to do a lot of speaking on your own outside of class. I would definitely recommend like trying to make some Japanese friends, get involved in the community, get involved in events, and there are a lot of things out there that you can do, international groups and whatnot. So definitely try to get involved and use your Japanese, because if you're only using your Japanese in a controlled environment, you're not really going to be able to speak Japanese outside. And once you've been in Japan, you'll realize that a lot of the stuff in the textbooks isn't really how Japanese people speak in real life. And so learning a lot of that stuff is part of the journey, and definitely just really try to get involved and speak as much as you can. And I think you can get a lot out of your time here.
Thanks for sharing your story, Jess. I had similar feelings to you, so it was great to commiserate. I've also done interviews with 2 Japanese teachers, as well as another Japanese language student, and I also have my own experiences to share. So if you're interested, there's a lot of content coming your way. If you're not, well, Anyways, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye. What's your experience learning the Japanese language, or any other language for that matter?